Colonel, last subject matter is something going on with respect to the Koreas, North and South, that we should know about.
Yeah, you realize that the coup is passed. The previous president is going to be impeached and imprisoned. He was a sellout to us. He was seen as an imperial proxy or a puppet of the United States. What happens next? The Koreans now realize more than ever that we are leaving Korea. Now, why do I say that? Because President Trump spoke publicly and he said he would be open to South Korea having its own nuclear arsenal. Setting aside whether South Korea even wants that and whether or not that's necessary, that's another discussion. The important point here is that President Trump, when I last spoke to him and he asked me, how long have we been in Korea? I said, sir, almost 80 years, almost 70 years. And he said, my God, that's ridiculous. He strongly feels that these overseas garrisons that are attached to this thing that we call informally the empire should be dismantled.
How many American troops are there? I bet he was startled at that number too.
Well, there are 23,000 troops and there are another 3,000, I think, Air Force. But that's not the only picture here. The larger picture is that if you remove us from the peninsula, I don't think there will be a war, and I don't think the South Koreans need a nuclear weapon. If you're going to do that, you need to do a couple of things. First of all, you have to talk to President Xi. Why do I say that? It's not because he loves North Korea. President Xi would like nothing better than to get rid of North Korea. Why? He's in the same position that the Russians were in or the Soviets were in back in the early 90s. I've got East Germany and West Germany. Which Germany do I really want? And the Soviets said, well, obviously, we really want West Germany. It's productive. We want to trade with it. We want to do business with it. This East Germany is a problem. And so East Germany was dropped. It literally went out of existence overnight. I think you're going to see something similar eventually happen on the peninsula with North Korea because it's a burden, not an asset. The only way North Korea has survived is because of Russia. And that's because both the Soviets and their successors saw that North Korea was a useful strategic hedge against us and Japan. Now, if you pull the forces out of South Korea, there is no requirement for U.S. forces in Japan because the U.S. forces there, primarily the Marines at Okinawa, not only, but primarily, are really there to reinforce the army on the peninsula. And the reason they're there is because Colin Powell couldn't find anything for the Marine Corps to do. And he finally said, well, look, let's give them the mission of reinforcing the army on the peninsula. And like many, many others, I don't think, Colin Powell ever thought there would be a war again on the peninsula. So we put the Marines there. We gave them literally the mission of reinforcing that. There's no requirement for them. And I would say not much requirement in Japan for us at all once we pull out of that Korean peninsula. And then the whole regional dynamic changes and it goes back to where it was in the past, with Japan once again as a major power who is the normal counterbalance, if you will, to Chinese power and influence. The Chinese never controlled anything beyond the limits of their coast. Everything else at sea was controlled by the Japanese.
But North Korea is run by a madman who does have access to a nuclear power. Am I right?
Well, I don't think he's as mad as people think. Remember that before he went to Hanoi to meet with President Trump to sign this document that would have denuclearized the Korean Peninsula, it would be denuclearized by now, I suspect, if President Trump had signed that. But unfortunately, he had breathing into his ears, the voices from hell. On one side was John Bolton. On the other side was this man, Mike Pompeo.
My God, it's a wonder he can still hear.
Yeah, and they poisoned any possibility for this agreement to succeed after both Putin and Xi said they'll support it. And it's very important. You can't do anything there without their support. So what I'm trying to say is that North Korea is not going to last very long once we leave South Korea. And we don't need to worry about a war because President Xi was the one that Kim went to see before he went to Hanoi. Why? Remember, there was this huge armored train that he took from North Korea to Beijing.
Yes.
All this attention. Why was he there? He was there to see the emperor, the Chinese emperor, who is effectively Xi. And the Chinese emperor said, go to Hanoi, sign the agreement. And he bowed and said, yes, Your Imperial Majesty, I will do that. And he was prepared to sign. We're not really needed in that part of the world. And again, I think what President Trump wants to do, he wants to demilitarize our relations with Asia. He wants to do business with Asia. He just wants it to be done on a level that makes sense for us. In other words, something that's, equitable and mutually beneficial, not lopsided in any particular direction. And the way to do that is to get out of South Korea and then ultimately get out of Japan. And the Japanese, privately, behind the scenes, are chomping at the bit to regain their sovereignty 100%.